I don't know how many times I called, or how many messages I sent. I only remember the last reply I got from David nearly a year ago. Just one short line. Busy with meetings. Take care, Mom. That was it. No follow-up. No, I love you. No warmth. Just cold efficiency like a memo sent from an assistant. After that, every message I sent slipped into some invisible black hole, unseen, unread, unanswered. Sometimes I stared at the screen for hours, hoping for a notification. Other times I'd unlock my phone out of instinct, only to find the same blankness staring back at me. But I kept telling myself he's just busy. He runs a company now. Dozens of employees, meetings, deadlines. He'll call when he can. Still, when the last seen timestamp showed 3 days ago, then 5, then 9, something inside me shriveled. Some nights I woke up at 2 a.m. in a panic, my hand fumbling in the dark for my phone, only to find nothing. No missed calls, no new messages, just silence. Thick, heavy silence that seemed to wrap around my lungs and squeeze. I live alone in an old wooden house on the edge of town. It's the kind of place where winter wind whistles through the cracks in the walls, and in summer mice scurry across the attic like they own it. It used to be a home. Now it's just a shell. A hollow space filled with ghosts of warm dinners, birthdays, bedtime stories. David's father died 3 years ago. Since then, I haven't been called mommy in the morning. No one says, "How was your day over dinner?" I stopped being a wife, a mother, the center of a family. Now I'm just an old woman who scrubs office trash cans at night and rides the last bus home. I work as a janitor at a corporate building downtown. My monthly salary just under $1,500, and out of that nearly a third goes to medications, blood pressure pills, antacids, and arthritis relievers. What's left is spent on discount bread-powdered milk and instant porridge. There are months when I have to split my blood pressure pills in half, take them every other day, and just pray. My winter coat has a tear at the elbow. I've sewn it 3 times. The fabric is thinning, but I keep wearing it. Because, what's the alternative? Still, every morning I comb my hair, neatly spray the last drops of that old perfume I've kept for years, and cook David's favorite breakfast fried eggs with scallions. It's not because I think he'll show up to eat it. It's a ritual, a silent act of love. Because if I stop hoping, I think my heart might give out. One day I saw his photo on a business news website. He was shaking hands with a client wearing a sharp gray suit, his hair slicked back, confident. The headline read, "Young CEO leads tech consultancy to $12 million valuation." I reached out and touched the screen. My fingers trembled. Not with pride, but with longing. Does he ever think of me? Does he remember this little house? Does he know that the woman who mopped floors to send him to college now survives on instant noodles and diluted medicine? Once I drafted a long message to him. Really long. I wrote it, deleted it, rewrote it. 7 times. In the end, I erased it all, and just sent "I miss you. Will you come home for Thanksgiving?" No reply. Then, one gray afternoon in early November, when I was bent over scrubbing a marble floor in some law firm's hallway, my phone buzzed. A message. From David. "Just 2 lines, Mom. I'll stop by this Thanksgiving. Need to ask you something." I froze. My knees buckled slightly. My heart pounded like I'd just run a mile. I read the message 10 times, then 20. My eyes welled up and I had to blink hard to keep from crying on the office floor. Could it be? Could my son be thinking of me again? Could this Thanksgiving finally be the one where laughter returns to this cold, quiet kitchen? I asked for a day off. My supervisor looked surprised I'd never taken one before. I took out the little envelope I kept hidden in a drawer. My savings. I went to the store and bought a small turkey, potatoes for mashing, a can of cranberry sauce, nutmeg, cinnamon, and pumpkin puree for the pie. It wasn't much, but it was enough, because I was cooking with love, and because my son was coming home. That night, I lit a candle and sat at the table, just to imagine what it would feel like when he sat across from me again. Maybe we would talk about old times. Maybe he'd bring good news. Maybe he'd smile and call me Mom like he used to. I thought about setting an extra place at the table just for show, but then I worried that would jinx it. I didn't know. I couldn't have known that the reunion I had longed for, prayed for, waited 2 full years to see, would be the beginning of the greatest heartbreak of my life. I woke up at 4 a.m. that morning, not because of an alarm clock, but because my heart was racing. Excitement, anxiety, hope, and something almost like joy. David was coming, after 2 long years, after hundreds of unanswered messages. My son was finally coming home, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I swept the front yard again, polished the windows until the sun bounced off them like they were mirrors. I scrubbed my pots, those old dented things I'd used for over 2 decades, until they shone like silver. The turkey I'd bought was small, a little uneven, and from the discount store, but I marinated it with the same spice rub my husband used to make David's favorite. I baked pumpkin pie using fresh eggs from the neighbor. I didn't have enough condensed milk, so I added warm water to stretch it. Still, the smell filled the entire kitchen. Cinnamon, nutmeg, brown sugar. For the first time in years, the house smelled like home. I looked around. Yes, it was still old, still creaky, but today, it felt alive, like something in its wooden ribs had awakened again, lit by the heart of a mother who dared to hope. Just before noon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My breath caught, and then he stepped out. David. Still my boy, but no longer the boy I remembered. Cashmere sweater and soft gray, sleek leather shoes, a silver watch that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Behind him came a woman, Victoria, his wife. Cream-colored fur coat, designer heels, hair styled in gentle waves like she'd walked straight out of a fashion spread. She walked with grace and distance. David looked at me and smiled. "Mom, something smells amazing." Then he hugged me. A short hug. 3 seconds. Not warm, not tight. A hug with gloves on. Still, I swallowed my emotions, smiled through the ache, and welcomed them in. Victoria gave me one of those polite half smiles people give at photo shoots, not out of affection, but obligation. I offered tea, asked how they'd been. David talked about the company expanding to the West Coast investor meetings retreats in Italy and Switzerland. Victoria chimed in now, and then David just bought me a Chanel purse in Milan. We're remodeling the kitchen marble countertops, of course. I nodded, smiled, but inside something drooped, like wilting flowers in a too bright room. There I sat, serving dishes I'd scraped together with a month's pay, listening to stories so extravagant they felt like they came from another galaxy. A galaxy where I didn't exist. When dessert time came, I brought out the pumpkin pie. Still warm, still fragrant. David took a bite, then leaned back, smiled warmly, and said, "Mom, I've been meaning to ask you something for a long time." I paused. Hope stirred. "Of course, sweetheart. Ask away. How do you like the lake house I got you, the one at Lake Morrison? I know how much you love being near the water." I froze. Lake house. A sound echoed inside me like glass shattering on tile. "What do you mean, David? I never received any house." David blinked, turned slowly toward Victoria. She was still sitting, but her posture had gone rigid. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Her hands clenched the napkin on her lap as if trying to hold something together. "Mom, I bought you that house 2 years ago. I remember everything, the documents, the deed transfer. I had Rebecca, my assistant, send the paperwork to your address." I looked him in the eyes. "David, I've never seen a deed. Never heard of that house. You never told me about it." Victoria stood abruptly. Her napkin dropped to the floor. "Excuse me, I just need to make a call. I have a salon appointment tomorrow. Hair, for the gala." She rushed into the kitchen, phone in hand, words tumbling out of her mouth in incoherent fragments. And suddenly it all changed. The house I had cleaned so carefully that morning, the house that had felt so full of warmth and soul, now felt heavy, oppressive, like the walls were closing in, trying to swallow me whole. David straightened in his chair. His voice grew sharp. "And what about the money, Mom? The monthly transfers $1,500 every month. Rebecca has been sending them to your account regularly. You never got them." I stood, held onto the table for support. "David, I've never received a single dollar. I looked into his eyes and saw something drain out of his face. He turned pale like he'd seen a ghost. 2 years. 2 winters spent choosing between heat and groceries. 2 summers of rationing medicine, skipping meals, boiling tea from old lemon peels to soothe my stomach. And now I learn that all this time my son believed I was being cared for, that he thought I had a home by a lake, that he thought I had enough. And all this time, someone else was living richly off the things meant for me. David stood up and began pacing the small living room, his phone trembling in his hands. Each step echoed between the walls like a ticking clock, tight, quick, panicked. He scrolled through emails, transfer receipts, digital copies of property deeds. Every time his thumb slid across the screen, his face grew a shade paler. Meanwhile, I remained seated. My hands gripped the edge of the table, not to steady the plate, but to steady myself. The pumpkin pie sat untouched, cold, forgotten, like the woman who had made it. From the kitchen came Victoria's voice, barely a whisper. She was on the phone, broken syllables, jittery breaths, something about appointments, hair salons, or maybe just excuses wrapped in panic. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel what they meant. She was trying to contain something about to explode. David looked up, his voice cracking like dry wood under pressure. Mom, I sent $1,500 every month for 2 years, plus a few more transfers for your medicine, for car repairs, for holidays. All of it went into an account with your name on it. I have proof. I looked at him, but no words came. My lips wouldn't move. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I did. Because I knew he wasn't lying. And that was what chilled me. It was as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me and asked me to smile while I froze to death. Victoria returned from the kitchen. No phone, no excuses. Her eyes were red, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't speak. David turned to her, not as her husband now, but as a man seeking answers. Not as my son, but as a CEO interrogating a liability. Do you know anything about the lake house, Victoria? You were the one who helped me file the paperwork with Rebecca at the time. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Maybe there was a mix-up, or the mail got lost, or the bank. Maybe they made a mistake. I looked at her. This woman who had once sat at my dinner table and offered to ladle soup into my bowl, who had smiled at me, those syrupy smiles, sweet but laced with something sharp underneath, who had called me mom with the softness of honey hiding the sting of venom. I stood up. My legs were trembling, but I refused to stay seated. My voice was steady. Too steady. Victoria, you live in comfort while your husband's mother eats moldy bread. You wear designer handbags each month while I take half a pill to stretch my treatment another week. Do you know what it's like to stand at the power company counter praying the bill didn't go up another $10? Do you know what it's like to choose between dinner and blood pressure medication? Do you? David froze. He turned to look at her, and for the first time I saw something vanish from his eyes. The light, the trust, the illusions. What remained was disbelief, and something close to horror. Rebecca said the documents for the lake house were sent to the address you provided, David said. Not to Mom's address. A different one. You called her. You gave her a new bank account number, said it was Mom's. Said she'd changed banks. Victoria's mouth opened again, but this time there were no words. Only tears. Big, fat, performative tears that rolled down her cheeks like beads of glass. But there was no sorrow in them. Only fear. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to. My parents were about to lose their house. I just meant to borrow it once. Then I didn't know how to fix it. It got out of hand. I could no longer stand. I sat down heavily in the chair, buried my face in my hands. I had believed her. I had defended her. When neighbors whispered that she looked down on me, I told them they didn't understand her. When she didn't call on my birthday, I said, she must be busy. I prayed for her to have a child so I could finally hold a grandbaby in my arms. And now, there she was, crying in the kitchen I scrubbed every morning, wearing a coat that probably cost me 3 months of back pain. tears streaming not for what she'd done to me, but because she might lose everything. That's the bitterness, not the stolen money, not even the lake house I never got to see. It was the invisibility, the knowledge that I wasn't forgotten. I was ignored. They had built a beautiful life off the resources meant to care for me while I had to choose between light bulbs and medicine. I don't know how long I sat there. All I know is that David said my name 3 times before I looked up. Mom, do you want to see the paperwork? We'll look into everything. I'll handle it. I looked at him. My son. The boy I once fed on watery porridge and condensed milk because we couldn't afford formula. The boy I once carried through sleet to a free clinic because he had a cough and I didn't have enough money for cough syrup. You can investigate David. But what I need is the truth. I need to know, in those 2 years, did you ever truly think about me? Silence fell over the room like a heavy wool blanket, thick, smothering, unspoken. The ticking of the wall clock grew loud like a countdown. Tick, tick, tick. And I knew then this wasn't Thanksgiving anymore. This was the day the ice started to crack, the day illusions shattered, the day everything changed. That night after David and Victoria left without another word, I sat alone in my cold, quiet kitchen. The pumpkin pie was still there, untouched except for a single bite. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrapped it carefully in foil and placed it in the fridge, not because I thought someone would eat it, but because part of me still wanted to preserve something. Something small. Something worth keeping. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I didn't moan or curse or ask why me. I just sat there. Still. Empty. But inside my head pieces were moving, shifting into place, one by one. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I called in sick to work. Mrs. Henderson, my supervisor at the cleaning company, sounded shocked to hear my voice. Margaret, is everything all right? I said only. Something's come up with family. I need to face a few things. She didn't press further. I didn't explain. There wasn't anything I could say that would make sense yet. David returned later that day, his eyes hollow, his face weary. He brought with him a briefcase full of documents, his phone, and a laptop. Gone was the cashmere-clad son who'd arrived yesterday. What sat at my kitchen table now was someone different, someone broken open, boiling, and burdened. He sat at the same table I'd eaten at alone for the past 2 years, and he opened the files. Deed transfers, bank receipts, authorization forms, one folder at a time. Then I picked up the deed to the lake house. My name was on it, my date of birth, my address. But when I reached the signature line, Margaret Harrison, my body went cold. David, I said softly, look at this. The M in my signature. I always loop it. Always. This one is straight. That isn't my handwriting. David didn't argue. He pulled out a birthday card I'd sent him last year, placed it side by side with the deed. Even without forensic training, the difference was clear. That signature was a lie. We went to the bank, a branch I'd never visited in my life. I brought everything, my ID, my social security card, my birth certificate, all the fragments of my identity. The receptionist flipped through the files, her brows furrowed. Ma'am, I don't see any transaction history under your account here, but we do have a different account, opened 2 years ago, under your name. That account began receiving $1,500 monthly deposits from a corporate source registered to your son's business. I asked to see the signature that opened the account. There it was again. My name, but not my handwriting. A forgery. Victoria hadn't just taken money, she had taken me. She had stolen my name, my identity, my entire presence in this world. The deeper we dug, the worse it became. David traced dozens of smaller transactions, $800 for dental expenses, $500 for eyeglasses, $1,000 labeled Christmas gift for Mom. Every dollar sent in love diverted by fraud. Over $43,000 all funneled into a ghost account. And a home valued over $200,000 that was legally under my name, yet I had never seen it, touched it, or even known it existed. That afternoon, we drove to 8 I-47 Maple Street. The address Rebecca had said she mailed the property documents to. It was a rundown apartment complex. We found Unit 2B, a for rent sign hung on the door. Vacant. The building manager squinted at the name. Yeah. Blonde girl. Young. Dressed fancy. Stayed about 4 months, then vanished. David clenched his jaw. I felt something cave in my stomach. How did she get my info? David, my social security number, my signature, my birth date. David swallowed. From the house, Dad's old filing cabinet, in the study. Victoria had a key. She lived with us. She could have taken anything. We drove back in silence. No music, no radio. Just the hum of the tires and the memories riding alongside us like shadows. We passed an old bakery on the corner of Main and Delancey. I remembered that place. 2 years ago, I stood in line there waiting for the day-old bread discount. I had $7 in my wallet. I stood for 10 minutes deciding if I should buy the bread or save it for medication. While I hesitated, Victoria had been soaking in a jacuzzi, in a house bought under my name. That evening I wrote in my journal. The first entry in months. Small, tidy letters like stitching thread across paper. I have been robbed. Not by a knife, but by a smile. Not on the street, but inside my home. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I needed time. To observe. To gather. To be sure. I didn't want revenge. Not the kind that screamed or shattered. I wanted clarity. I wanted truth to rise slowly, patiently, like oil on water. David looked at me that night and said, "Mom, let me handle this. You rest. You've been through enough." I shook my head. "No, David. This is mine to fix. I was the one who was erased. So I will be the one to return. Not with tears, but with silence, the kind that speaks when the time is right." 3 days later, David invited Victoria to my house. Not to a law office, not to their gleaming high-rise condo, not even a neutral cafe. Here, at this peeling wooden table, in this crooked old kitchen, where the first lie was planted. I sat at the head of the table. The same table where Victoria once tapped her manicured nails while giggling about her trip to Europe. The same table where she once placed her wine glass and laughed about how the waitress brought the wrong dish so provincial. Today her hands were empty, no designer purse, no polished smile, only a face dulled by fear and sleepless nights. David placed his laptop on the table and opened it. The screen lit up with damning precision bank transaction logs, property transfer forms, side-by-side comparisons of real and forged signatures, copies of account openings and wiring records, a chronological spreadsheet of every payment made over 2 years. No one spoke. The ceiling fan ticked overhead like a countdown to the end of pretense. Finally, David broke the silence. I confirmed everything with the bank. Mom never set foot in that branch. She never signed anything. But an account under her name was opened using her documents. Supplied by you. Victoria's eyes shifted from me to David, then back again. Her lips trembled. Her eyes welled up, but the tears refused to fall. I just borrowed it. My parents were going to lose their house. My dad has a heart condition. I panicked. I didn't think. I interrupted her. For the first time in my life, I cut someone off without apology. Didn't think month 1 I received nothing you didn't think. Month 2, my calls went unanswered you didn't think. Month 3, I kept texting into silence and you slept easier each night. 2 years later, I was cutting pills in half to make them last while your parents soaked in hot tubs and toasted wine on lakefront views bought with my name. And you didn't think? Victoria broke. She cried now, loud, guttural sobs that filled the room. The kind of sobs you can't fake. I'm sorry, I swear I was going to pay it back, but it all spiraled. I had to help my family. I couldn't stop. David sat frozen, his fists clenched together on the table. His voice was cold, not angry, just stripped of every illusion. You didn't just take money. You stole a promise I made to my mother, that she would never suffer again, that she would never go without. You made me believe I was a good son while she lived like a ghost. I turned to David, placed my hand over his. You weren't wrong, son. You just trusted the wrong person. Then I stood up and walked to the drawer. I pulled out a folder, thick, stamped, prepared, certified copies, legal declarations, statements from our attorney, proof of identity theft, forgery, misappropriation of funds, tax fraud. I placed it gently in front of Victoria. I don't need your apology. I need your signature on a full confession before I turn this into the police. She looked like she might faint. Her tears were now streaked across her cheeks, but there was no more drama in them. Just a stunned silence like a fire burned out too quickly. I need to talk to a lawyer. I can negotiate. I raised my hand again. Don't bargain with tears. You've spent them too freely. This time let the truth speak. David made a phone call. An hour later, our family lawyer and a representative from the local police department arrived. Victoria sat on the same kitchen chair she once mocked for being too wobbly. Now she was the one shaking. The lawyer read her charges aloud, one by one. Count 1, forgery of legal documents. Count 2, identity theft. Count 3, breach of fiduciary trust in marriage. Count 4, federal tax evasion through falsified income reports. When the officer gently pulled her from the chair and handcuffed her, I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I stood up, walked to David, and he embraced me. Not the 3-second hug from earlier, not a formality, a real hug. The kind of hug that says, I finally see you. I finally understand. Mom, he whispered, I'm sorry. I never imagined the woman I loved could do something like this. I left you alone too long. I held him tighter. You didn't leave me alone, son. I was just waiting for you to come back, and today you did. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I made a cup of hot tea, wrapped myself in my old blanket, and sat on the porch as the wind turned cool. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel hungry. I felt light, as if something had finally been lifted off my chest that I didn't know I'd been carrying. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt seen. 2 months had passed since Victoria was arrested. That was when I finally moved into the lake house David had once gifted me. The day I stepped through its doors, I was speechless. Not because it was luxurious, though it was, but because it was beautiful in a way that choked me up. Quiet, generous beauty. The kind that felt too big for someone like me to claim. The walls were painted a soft, calming beige. Wide windows opened toward the sparkling blue of Morrison Lake, its waters shimmering with gentle waves. Every afternoon, sunlight spilled through and landed right on the armchair near the bookshelf where I now sit sipping tea reading old letters. Some torn at the folds, some yellowed with time, all still warm with memory. People often say, home is where someone waits for you. I'm not sure this place fits that definition, but I know one thing: this lake house is justice returned. Late, but deep, and quietly firm. David had worked tirelessly. He hired attorneys, handled paperwork, and restored nearly everything that had been taken. The fraudulent accounts were frozen. Some funds were recovered. And after taxes and legal fees, I was left with more than $95,000 more than I had ever held in my life. For the first time, I didn't have to count pills before buying medicine, didn't have to eat stale bread to save pennies, didn't have to turn off the heater halfway through the night because I was afraid of the electric bill. But money does not mend the invisible wounds. It couldn't erase the hollow feeling of being deceived, of being sacrificed by someone I once called my daughter-in-law. Some nights I dreamed of Victoria. She stood in my kitchen smiling, not that smug, calculated grin, but a real one, the kind I had never seen from her in real life. I would wake up not crying, just empty, because once I had believed in her, loved her, even hoped she would be the one to care for David when I no longer could. Now all I can hope is that prison teaches her something. 18 months. Maybe enough time to learn. David changed too. Not with flowers or apologies or grand promises, but in quiet, steady ways. He started visiting every weekend, brought me cinnamon waffles, bought me warm slippers, installed a Bolero playlist on my phone, but most importantly, he listened. Mom, he said one afternoon, you used to stay silent because you didn't want to be a burden. But now whatever you say, I'll listen, all the way. I just smiled. Some children must lose you before they learn how to hold you close. When Victoria stood trial, I didn't attend. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to say to her. Not all silence is forgiveness. Some silences are the last goodbye. 1 year later, David came to visit, not alone. He brought a woman named Jennifer, a legal accountant, sharp, bright, confident eyes that didn't flinch. I watched her for a long moment, then whispered to David, loud enough for her to hear, "If you ever hurt her, I won't stay quiet like last time." Jennifer laughed. David blushed. It was the first time I saw my son look sheepish, not like a successful CEO, but like a boy learning how to love the right way, from scratch. Morrison Lake stays calm most evenings. I sit on the porch, read, make tea, sometimes write letters. Just last week I penned one to Victoria's parents, people who in their own way were victims too. I wrote, "I do not hate," because I know no parent teaches their child to become a thief. But sometimes, evil grows from the ease of being forgiven too many times. And I ended with, "I hope you are well, and I hope she learns to stop. Before life decides to teach her another cruel lesson, I no longer work. No more scrubbing floors. No more picking up trash at 3 a.m. No more trading sleep for minimum wage. I have retired, not because of age, but because for the first time I am living. Living fully, living truthfully, living for myself, and yet even in peace, something lingers, a quiet sadness without a name. I used to dream of Thanksgiving dinners filled with laughter, the smell of roast turkey, tiny feet running around the table, voices full and overlapping. Now I have a lake, a house, the sun. But some things can't be bought back, can't be restored, can't be forgotten. I tell this story not for pity, but for someone out there who's living in silence like I once did. I want you to know you can stand, not with rage, but with memory, with observation, with calm strength, and with the unshakable belief that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way back home. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, if you followed me this far, tell me, what city are you watching from? Leave a comment so I know this voice, this story, has reached someone beyond this quiet lake.